We are slowly but surely emptying out this container. We're gonna make a big step today because it's water making install time. Got a little too excited with the Watermaker unpacked. I probably should show you what's here on the table before I start installing things. So let's take a look. Starting off, gotta have the wrenches for getting the filters undone. Lots of spare hardware up there, hose barbs and all that fun stuff. Got some three-way valves. One thing that the Schenker doesn't do quite as well as a Cruise RO is having a decent, easy pickling setup. So gonna be using some of that. I think I got a good idea in mind. Got freshwater hose. We've got our controller up there. This is the check valve, so I believe seawater is coming up there. We'll have freshwater coming there, and then this goes out to the pump. Up here we have got our carbon filter assembly. So freshwater system will come into that. We've got, this will be the 5-micron filter, and then this is an accumulator as well, designed to kind of even out any pressure spikes and whatnot. Pump itself, big old baddie. And then this is where the magic happens. This is going to be the control box. Looks a bit complicated in there, but it's not too bad. So power to the pump's going to go over there. We're going to bring power to the batteries in there. And what I do like, I'm going to come in here. There are a few switches kind of as part of this control board. So the Schenker is a little more automated than the Cruise RO we've got. But if some of the sensors fail, we can swap those switches and get it back kind of into manual mode, which is very, very nice. Then a few other things. This is going to be the pump head. We've got hardware for securing the base, which is still down the container. The Watermaker would have to stay in the container a bit longer, as there was still a lot to do before I was ready for it. Running wiring was first up. I had to run the big cables for the boost pump down to where it would be mounted in the bilge, and then complete the connections at the bus bar. Our old Cruise RO Watermaker had required me to get into the generator logger to start it up and shut it down. One of my goals for the Schenker system was to automate it a bit more and be able to operate it from our 12-volt panel. In order to do that, I had a bit of reconfiguring to do before I could finally start installing equipment. I'm going to get started with the easy stuff for the Watermaker today. I'm kind of thinking we can get the boost pump mounted down in the bilge. Then we're going to go ahead and try to mount the control box. I've got a space picked out up in a cabinet, so it's going to be out of the bilge, a little bit hopefully drier, more protected spot. So I'm thinking if I can get that accomplished today, I'm going to feel pretty good. I was as meticulous as ever with getting the boost pump mounted in just the right place. The shelf I had chosen to use formerly housed a lift pump for our old generator. This pump would be a much tighter fit with all the plumbing that would also need to fit in this bilge compartment. Hence my rationale for the meticulous planning, this time at least. I got everything bolted down using some rubber shock absorbing feet to try and help dampen any vibrations, and mounted the pump head as well. Then I could finish up mounting the control box in the cabinet right above the pump. It's a rare day when I think I can say I accomplished all the stuff on my to-do list. But I think today's one of those days, which feels really, really good. I like starting with the easy stuff just because it feels like it builds a little momentum for the project. And while I'm kind of working on the easy stuff, I can kind of see, all right, here's where I need to route other components, all that fun stuff. Because there are a few things I need to get that don't come with the Watermaker, like hoses, fittings, stuff like that. So I think I've got a pretty good grasp on all the stuff I'm going to need to get, so I can get those on order. While I'm waiting for those, move on to other projects. But since we're talking about the Watermaker this video, we'll jump ahead till that stuff gets here. Down in the former generator locker, soon to be Watermaker locker. And it has been quite a while since I've been working on this project, evidenced by the fact it's cold now. Also, we're in the water, and we're no longer on the hard. This is one of those projects that I got started, and then just kind of things kept pulling me in different directions. So I wanted to make sure a few things got done before we got in the water, namely shore power and all the air cons and stuff wired in so that we could have power and heat. And those are done. So time to come back to this. we're going to go ahead and start with kind of mounting all the different components. So I've been trying to strategically place things around. We're going to be mounting the Zen100. We've got the carbon filter. We've got the pre-filter with the accumulator. We've got a pressurized pump that I'm going to be using for the freshwater flush side of the system. So that'll be its own dedicated pump separate from the Starry Horizons freshwater pressurized system. So we're going to go ahead and get all that stuff mounted in here so I can figure out where all the hoses are going to run. This time, the Watermaker was a lot smaller than the generator it was replacing, so I had quite a bit more room to work with. The Zen100 comes with huge L-shaped brackets to mount it in place and prevent it from moving when the boat is bouncing around at sea. I got these bolted down and then bolted the unit to the brackets. That thing is nice and secure and not going anywhere. The other components that would be mounted in this locker were a bit easier. Slowly continuing to make progress down here. Got the pump for the freshwater flush all wired in, so that is good. Also, over on this wall, we've got, this will be the carbon filter for the freshwater flush, and that will be, there we go, the micron filter on the seawater inlet. So that's all done, wired in, which is good. Now I can start doing the plumbing connections. One of the things I do really like about this new Schenker Watermaker for us is that it is a bit more automated, but we still have the option to kind of operate this thing manually. If a sensor fails or something like that, we can still make water, which is important for us, especially because we do a lot of remote cruising. We don't have to go into a marina and wait for parts all the time. Now, what I'm working on today, the reason I'm inside, is it's a little cold out there, and we're working on trying to figure out how we're gonna plumb in the fresh water output coming from the Watermaker. I've got the components laid down on the table. Let's take a quick look. There are three things down here. We've got a three-way valve. This is a TDS, Total Dissolved Solids probe, and this is a 12-volt solenoid diverter valve. So what we're going to do is we're going to have fresh water coming in from the Watermaker to this valve. And the reason we've got this valve in place is I want to set things up for future pickling. So if I want to pickle, I want the output to come down this way, back to the pickling bucket. If we're making fresh water, we got to go up this way to the probe. The probe will then come this way, we'll plumb in a couple connections, come down to this diverter valve, and this valve will be controlled by a relay, which gets its information from the probe, hence all the wiring. Now, this valve, if the total dissolved solids are appropriate, will send water out to the freshwater tank. If it's not, then it comes down and outputs overboard. Now, as I was talking about manual backups, this does have a manual backup. I can force it to send water to the tank if something fails with the probe or the relay, etc. So this is how we're gonna lay things out. I like how that's gonna look. Now I do want to go ahead and just kind of put a bunch of the PTFE, I think that's the acronym, tape here on all the threads while we're inside, and then I can get outside and mount everything.
decently pleased with how this has turned out. Kind of actually matches my vision, amazingly enough. So we've got the fresh water coming in from the Watermaker on that blue line. We've got our three-way valve, so pickling down and then up for the freshwater production over to the solenoid valve. Red is going to be for water with too high of TDS. Blue is for production freshwater. So both those are plumbed in. Everything's nice and secure. It may take me a long time, but it turns out pretty well. We're so close to being done. The last bit to be kind of plumbed in here, this is going to be kind of the brine discharge. So again, I need to come up with a way to have it pickles, hence another three-way valve. But I think I've got it. Just need to get everything mounted in place, clean everything up, and then we'll do a little system overview.
Using three-way valves on the brine discharge and the production water lines is going to make life so much easier when the inevitable time comes to pickle the Watermaker. I designed the plumbing so that the added pickling hoses all run down towards the boost pump. Switch the valves to pickling mode, and I'll easily be able to cycle a pickling solution from a bucket. Schenker's recommendation is to undo hoses and then run them down towards the bucket. That's not super practical without cruising, and is also much more likely to make a mess. All the plumbing up in the new Watermaker locker is pretty much done, so I figured it'd also be good to show you guys what I have done down here in the bilge to plumb in the boost pump. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to try to manage both camera and light, so bear with me here. We'll start out with, that's the seacock and through hole that we had previously installed. So raw seawater comes up to the pre-filter, comes around to the on-off valve so I can change the pre-filter if needed, and then the seawater comes up to the non-return valve. So seawater up from the bottom, and then the pressurized fresh water from the pump that we installed up in the Watermaker locker is this blue hose on the left side. Now you can see how tight it is. There's a lot of hoses kind of running back that way. But if we continue on, then we've come to another three-way valve. And the idea being that elbow will be the intake from a pickling bucket if I need to. But right now, coming down and around, continuing all the way around, coming back to the boost pump. So then boost pump, we've got the in and out right there. Blue hoses circle all the way back around and back up towards the Watermaker locker. Now I did install a 12-volt computer fan down here because I'm a little worried about this being in the bilge and that pump getting very hot, so hopefully that fan will help keep it cool. Now, up here in this locker where we're working on the control panel, got a couple hoses just kind of coiled up there. Those are the other pickling hoses that come down here. So I can pull those out, put them in a bucket down here, and do my pickling all from one spot. It's definitely tight quarters down there in the bilge, but I'm really pleased with how everything's come together. I think all the hoses run, they're nice and clean, no kinks, all that stuff. Having all the pickling lines down here is going to make a big difference when that inevitably happens. So happy, very happy with all that. Now there's a few last things to go finish up in the Watermaker locker. We've got a few last wiring jobs complete before everything is done. I gave you that overview I've been talking about. One of which is this bad boy right here. That's what Schenker calls their electro valve. This is the carbon filter. So this will be the freshwater, pressurized freshwater system. So this will be controlled by the control panel, and if we were doing our freshwater flush, this will open and thus send fresh water down to a non-return valve down the bilge. Fresh water goes through the pump, comes back up, cleans the Watermaker. So kind of a nice system. Now the other one we have to wire in, that's this bad boy. That's the 12-volt solenoid valve that will be controlled by the TDS probe and controller, so that if the water is good, it'll go to the tanks. If it's not, it closes and sends it overboard. So we got to get that wired in. Those are kind of the last two wiring things, and I cannot wait to get them done. When Amy works on other projects, I have to get a bit creative to accomplish things solo. Setting the wire wheels on a rope made running the wire a lot easier. I got everything inside and wired in, and it was starting to feel like the end was in sight. I'm done with the Watermaker install, which sounds super weird to say, and as soon as I say this, I know I'm going to come up with something else, but
Really excited to have gotten this far at least. And one thing I did want to touch on that I haven't talked about too much is this kind of control center. This is something I actually had to do a little bit custom myself. Expanded some skill sets and drew something in CAD to kind of come up with a mount that could actually handle both the Schenker controller and the TDS controller as well. And it looks really nice, so I'm pleased with how that turned out. Now, I briefly mentioned it, but I did have to rewire some stuff here at the 12-volt panel to repurpose a couple of the switches. So the switch for the air cons, the Watermaker now powers the contactors down in the equipment locker, provides power to everything that needs it. So yeah, really one of those pat myself on the back moments. I'm feeling pretty slick with how it all came together. And the last step in this whole process is probably going to be the longest of everything, and that's the commissioning, because nothing ever goes smoothly in commissioning. But let's get to that and see if we can get this thing actually working.